headline story: solving Nigeria's manufacturing challenges. A country's ability to manufacture and produce what it uses and consumes can be an indicator of economic health. What does Nigeria manufacture? While some may argue that Africa's largest economy does manufacture, the questions are capacity and ability to meet demand, and they remain. What are the problems in this industry, and how can they be addressed? I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Manufacturing industries are those that engage in the transformation of goods, materials, or substances into new products. The manufacturing sector in Nigeria is comprised of 13 activities: oil refining, cement, food, beverages, and tobacco, textile, apparel, and footwork, wood and wood products, pulp, paper, and paper products, as well as chemical and pharmaceutical products, non-metallic products, plastic, and rubber products. You also have electrical and electronic, basic metal and iron and steel, motor vehicles and assembly, and other manufacturing. Now, these should be enough to boost Nigeria's micro and macroeconomic index to enviable highs, but some issues have been hindering the possible progression of the sector. But despite these challenges, there are companies that have been able to brave the odds and come out strong with various products for Nigeria and beyond. Now, joining me from Abuja is Tokwe Fasua. He's an economist, former banker, and the CEO of Global Analytics Consulting Limited. Tokwe, good morning and welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, let's start with the issues, because I think before we can get to some of the solutions, we need to know what we're actually addressing. So while there are numerous problems that are affecting Nigeria's manufacturing sector, there are also numerous opportunities, and we'll get into that as well. But the country must first address the challenges. So you've witnessed Nigeria's manufacturing sector change from its heydays. What are some of the challenges that you see the sector is facing now?
Right. Okay. I think there's a plethora of challenges, actually, from issues of how to obtain foreign exchange for, to bring in machinery, equipment, raw materials, all sorts of things they need, to issues of capacity for the economy to absorb what it is they're producing, to issues of value addition, to issues of where to find talent to run their operations in terms of the kind of human capital that we have in the country. In every aspect of their work, there are challenges everywhere for the manufacturing sector in every aspect of the operations. So from the logistic issues, the challenges they face with customs when they bring in their materials and the things that they have to import. For those, including, for those of them who are export-oriented, there are tremendous challenges with exportation and the logistics of sending things out of this country. So I think that it's almost a fool's game to go into manufacturing in Nigeria.
Wow.
Because the sustainability of operations is also another thing. There are only a very few organizations that could be said to have sustainable operations that can sit back and watch their machine roll and expect to make profit into the future. That's very few organizations who can actually sit back. And I'm talking about maybe some of the Dangote operations. But even Dangote has had to shut down a few of his operations. For example, the tomato industry that they put up in Kano, Kaduna axis, Katsina axis, had to be shut down. I think it's still shut down now because in that instance, it couldn't even get enough raw materials from the market to sustain the operation of the. So all sorts of things happen. I say it's a very, very tough terrain for entrepreneurs. I mean, especially in the manufacturing sector.
And it's unfortunate to hear that, given the potential of this sector to not only employ, but also bring in investment. But another one of the things you did mention that has been a very big issue is also finance, and we can't ignore that. So we've heard from many business people about their difficulties in getting financing from the banks, the experiences they've had. Many have said that Nigerian banks in particular were more interested in collateral than anything else. In terms of this issue of financing, even though you've used some strong language and said it's a fool's game to actually get into manufacturing in Nigeria, what's the workaround? What can we do to ensure that if there's someone who wants to get into this sector, who wants to try their hand at this, that they can get some financing? Must we continue to look at the traditional financial systems, or is there other ways to go?
Well, I think it's a good thing to begin to think of other alternatives and to be very ingenious about that, because I always believe that we can always challenge ourselves to get other solutions to our challenges, as it were. The finance issue is a different ballgame altogether, especially because right now, as I speak to you, lending rates are still in the region of very close to 30% when you put everything in. And of course, how much margin can an organization make in manufacturing? You can't manufacture and expect to do 50% margin so that you can cover your 30% rates of your interest rates on your facilities that you are running. And of course, you see a scenario where many of those facilities go moribund and sticky, and then you go on a different trajectory trying to solve that problem. So financing is a major issue, especially for organizations that intend to scale their operations and do much better than they are doing right now. So yeah, what can they do? Perhaps the bigger organizations should think of things like corporate bonds, something like that they could have some breather, and they could also raise a long-term financing through corporate bonds. That hasn't been very popular in Nigeria because our investors as well don't like to think long-term. Corporate bonds probably come and say, okay, listen, we want to give you 8% for the next 20 years, and we'll repay you after 20 years and so on. But 8% will not move many Nigerian investors who were used here to making 50%, 100% on investment and so on. And again, of course, inflation is doing 18.13%, and a good investment will first of all cover inflation and make some good extra above inflation. However, because we live in a world of fintechs, financial technology, it's a good, some smart Nigerian chaps should actually sit down and look at how they can get some ingenious and very interesting alternatives for the manufacturing sector, especially in the area of financing. It's not just going to be adequate for them to depend only on the banks.
Let's stick with this, because we have seen some movement officially. In recent times, we've seen the Central Bank of Nigeria mandate deposit money banks to lend more and even threaten to sanction those who fail to do so while rewarding those who do. And you yourself also mentioned, of course, the lending rate. Do you think this is an impetus for the banks? Could this actually help if the central bank goes through with the carrot and stick approach that it wants to use in regard to this?
Yes, it's good. It's a good idea. Like I said, it's all about a combination of several approaches, and several ideas. Because the central bank was concerned about, just how easy it is for the banks to just come and pack their money with CBN. One of the things they did was also to crash Treasury bills rate, T-bills rates, to something very ridiculous from where it was before. Banks could put money in there for 14%, 16% before a couple of years back. The central bank removed that incentive and then also try to compel them to do a more lending to the real sector. So it's part of the role of the central bank to so do. Of course, we saw that initially, when that instruction came, there was an uptick in the lending that the banking sector did to the real sector. So we need more of that. The central bank should continue to follow up on that initiative. It compels some of them to actually do a little bit more for the real sector. There's also this initiative that the central bank has, whereby a certain percentage of the profits of banks, I think 5%, is deducted and used to support small and medium scale enterprises through the NISAL platform. I think it's called AgsMe's loan. So they've been doing that. Last year, I know that quite a number of people actually benefited from those loans. However, the point is, when you're talking about manufacturing specifically, it is usually capital intensive.
Yes.
It's a long-term venture. Many Nigerian SMEs are only interested in businesses where they can go in quickly and come out quickly, because by the time you're thinking of setting up operation, having an assembly line and so on, that takes a whole lot in terms of capital, in terms of technology, in terms of capacity to run those kind of operations, and then you have to be in it. Those ones will not give you the returns in another 2 or 3 years. It's going to take a while.
Okay.
So manufacturing is a particularly tough nut to crack for the economy. And remember that economies grow from primary production, for example. That's where Nigeria is largely. Is either we're planting and selling cocoa beans or groundnuts or even things like rice. And then the economies move to secondary product, which is manufacturing.
Yeah. Secondary
product to manufacture, you add value to that. And then real developed economies, they are right there at the top, manufacturing and selling tertiary products and services, for example, like technology. Nigeria's biggest import year on year is actually technology. Okay, all of the phones we buy, the laptops, the desktops, the technology, the softwares that the banks use, and all sorts of things that we rely on. The biggest import for Nigeria year on year is actually technology, and that tells us a lot.
Before we go for a break, I want to get to another point that will form a part of the basis for our further conversation. But it's interesting you talk about the value chain, because there's no point in time we talk about agriculture or manufacturing that the fact that we don't add value to the products that are in one way or the other produced here doesn't come up. But also another aspect of this is policy and regulations. And there have been many people who say that the changes from administration to administration, the inconsistencies in policies and regulations, even the multiple taxation that is experienced in different sectors and even with manufacturing have been one of the reasons we've seen a reduction in foreign investments. What effects do you think these inconsistencies and changes have had, particularly on the manufacturing sector?
Like I said earlier, manufacturing is a long-term venture, and it takes a whole lot before you can manufacture one unit or whatever it is you set out to. Everything in the value chain of your operational chain must be in place. And then, of course, so like you rightly mentioned, policy inconsistency, even wrong policies. Recently, there's a very interesting one that happened with the in the auto manufacturing sector. We know that we don't have a lot of that in Nigeria, but there's a couple of people trying. There's Ojo in Kaduna. There's Innocent somewhere in Newi there. And all of a sudden, government decided to remove the
import tariff.
35% certain. Yes, not quite. They said the tariff, it used to be 35% tariff and 35% other charges, which made it about 70% for importation of the new cars. But they took out the 35% and basically reduced in half the tariff barrier for bringing in new vehicles. And so you would wonder, so if somebody actually had set up operation hoping that, okay, that sector was protected in Nigeria, all of a sudden it disappears. And however, for countries that want to actually, encourage that sector, what they do is they ensure that that sector is fully protected. In India, it's been 100% tariff for as far back as I can remember. In China, it's the same thing. And all of a sudden, you see companies like Tata in India, Mahindra, you see Geely in China, and all sorts of places are coming up. So policies are essential. Policies can make or mar.
Yeah.
And equally, taxation is an issue in Nigeria. Multiple taxation, state governments will come, all sorts of people will come. The moment you set up operation and you put a signboard and they see that you're doing one thing or the other, that's why I said before that manufacturing is a fool's game. A lot of smart people just decide to just maybe set up financial operations and trade one or two things that are invisible and make so much money. So why bother to set up operation to provide the things that people really need or that the economy really needs?
I have to interrupt you here. Okay, I apologize. I have to interrupt you here because we need to take a break. But I'm going to follow up on this policy situation because this banning of certain goods and services, it affects the consumer at the long run. But people will say that government needs to encourage local production and needs to encourage nascent sectors such as such as manufacturing. We'll get into that when we come back. We're looking at solving Nigeria's manufacturing challenges on today's edition of Business Edge. We'll be right back. Still with me on Business Edge is economist and former banker Tokwe Fasua. And Tokwe, we're talking about policies before, and let's talk about a policy that many times affects the Nigerian consumer more at the end of the day. And that is governments typically banning the importation of an item in order to encourage local production and manufacturing. We've seen it with rice, solar panels, tomato paste, furniture, clothes, and even other items at various times. But it's the Nigerian consumer who ends up having less in their pockets and who pays more for this product. And then many times we also see a black market that's developed around this consumable as well. Is there a middle ground when it comes to this situation, particularly for manufacturing? How does government protect these new industries or protect the industries that are there, but also not necessarily putting so much pressure on the naira that's in the pockets of the Nigerian consumer?
Right. So I said there's a good question you have asked regarding policy and implications of policy for the Nigerian people.
All right, we're having some technical issues there towards the end. Even as much as technology may be the biggest thing Nigeria is importing, it also can cause us some problems in the long run. Discussing with Tokwe Fasua there, former banker, economist, as well as the CEO of Global Analytics Consulting Limited, looking at solving Nigeria's manufacturing challenges. So we had gotten to the point in the conversation where we're talking about policy, and many people have agreed that policy flip-flops, changes in regulation from administration to administration, have been issues that have affected Nigeria's manufacturing sector. We've also touched on the issue of taxation, whether it's state, it's federal, or even local. And as Tokwe said, once you put up a signboard, somebody's going to come and bring you a tax that you need to pay. There have been multiple calls for Nigeria to harmonize her tax structure so that businesses know what is due, when is due, and who it is due to. And we wanted to get into the opportunities that lie in this sector. Even though Tokwe has said that he believes it's a fool's game, many have seen that there are some opportunities to be found in Nigeria's manufacturing sector. Now, some of the strengths of the sector include cheap labor. Domestic demand is also buoyant as long as Nigerians have money in their pockets, and some inputs are available and cheaper domestically. So while it might be difficult to get finance, to work around the structures or the regulations and the regulators. Okay, Tokwe, you're back. We have to go in just a few minutes, but let's see if you can answer that question, because that policy issue of how it affects the consumer is a massive one for many people. And then I want us to see if we can touch on some opportunities in the sector. So go ahead quickly, Tokwe.
Very quickly, to let you know that those items you mentioned were not banned, but they are not being supported for foreign exchange by the central bank. Yes. So very important, because we can't afford to ban anymore, especially now that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is in WTO. So, however, we're not the only ones. Every country looks for ways of encouraging some some sectors and some products locally vis-a-vis the importation of those products. So, however, like you rightly said, it must be considered to see whether we're not basically fostering inflation on our people with some of this policy. So I think that before this policy should be enacted, the government should try and get the perspective of the consumers. Because right now, the other day, I went into the market a couple of days back, which I usually do from time to time. And I tell you what, in the last 6 months or so, the prices of everything has skyrocketed in Nigeria. I wonder how people cope, especially those at minimum wage level.
I'm in agreement with you. I'll even say now I'm planning a party, and right now I think it's going to be a party of one, having come back from the market and see what things stand. So, Tokwe, finally, you've said that manufacturing is a fool's game in Nigeria, but we've seen those who find opportunities for themselves there. There's cheap labor, there's domestic demand, as long as Nigerians do have money. And of course, we've seen that some inputs are available cheaper and domestically as well. In just 30 seconds, what opportunities can there be for manufacturing in Nigeria?
You mentioned it, of course. Well, what I think we should be advising people is to actually really look at what people need. When the need is there, then you have a business, you know. Basically, so if you actually look at the market and say where can I key in that we can produce something that our people will need. Of course, there's the challenge of imports coming in that could be cheaper than whatever it is before you set up all your operations. So again, I also understand that a lot of foreigners that do business here, the Chinese, Indians, they first of all really do research into the incentives that government is giving. But a lot of our local people we become a bit cynical. We believe that all those things
don't mean anything.
But you see, the Chinese and India, for example, people are doing exports and they don't understand that there's something called an export expansion grant. All right, if you're doing export in Nigeria, there's a grant that you are entitled to. So if you are not sure about all of these things, talk to a consultant. There are a lot of opportunities still abound in spite of the challenges.
All right, Tokwe, we'll have to come back because we have not talked about road infrastructure and how it affects manufacturing. We haven't talked about access as well. There's electricity, and there's also the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and how Nigerian manufacturers can also take advantage of that. So I look forward to having a second round to this conversation. Tokwe Fasua, CEO of Global Analytics Consulting Limited, thank you for joining me on Business Edge today. And we're going to speed through NC4 to watch before we get kicked out of the studio, and we start with the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector development arm of the World Bank, and it has announced plans to lend $25 million, or about 2.7 billion Kenyan shillings, to Stellar Warehousing and Logistics Limited, which is a real estate development company in Kenya. From there, we go to the House of Representatives in Nigeria has urged the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation to review the status of licenses issued to indigenous companies to run modular refineries. Number 3 on our list takes us to South Africa, where Eskom Holdings has announced that it is unable to agree to certain union demands over wage increases and declined to make an offer on basic salary until labor groups respond. And finally, on NC4 to watch, our last story to watch out for, Justice Fred Ochieng said although Harjet Pandal Singh and Sons Limited did not table actual records from Chimeli Sugar Company to prove that he was a large-scale farmer as claimed, Kenya Power cannot be absolved from the obligation to pay damages just because the farmer failed to pay, or rather prove, his claim with certainty. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. We have a website. There also is a YouTube channel and an app so that you can keep us with you wherever you go. I'm Tolu Lokwe at Dileri Balogun. Do have a pleasant day.